Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Chosen and Unfrozen. Today's message is entitled, What is Required for Those Differently Wired? What is required for those differently wired? I'm coming from the book in the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. Reads as follows. Let a man so account of us as the ministers of the Messiah and stewards of the mysteries of Yah. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. But with me is a very small thing that I should be judged of you or of man's judgment. Yea, I judge not my own self, for I know nothing by myself. Yet am I not hereby justified, but he that judgeth me is the Messiah. All right, now, what is required for those differently wired? Let's break a couple of words down here. In verse 1, it says, let a man so account of himself as the ministers of the Messiah and stewards of the mysteries of Yah, right? The mysteries of the Most High, right? But stewards. So stewards is referenced in Strong's Concordance as G3623, which is the Greek word oikon oin amos, oikon oim amos, which is figuratively a gospel preacher. All right, now a gospel preacher doesn't mean that you are standing behind a pulpit in a building preaching from that pulpit in a three-piece suit. That's not a gospel preacher. Gospel preachers come in all different dress styles, all forms, shapes, sizes, creeds, colors, whatever, right? So that's what's meant by stewards. Now in verse 2 it says, moreover, it is required in stewards. So required is referenced as G2212, which is Dezateo. Dezateo means seek after for means. So the stewards, those ministers, those preachers of the gospel, it's required. It's meant for them to seek after for means. All right. So we're supposed to seek after for means. We're supposed to seek and grab hold to more spiritual things. That's the only way that we can share the mysteries, right? We can't share if we are not seeking after ourselves. So we need to seek after ourselves. That's one thing that is required, right? But here's the problem. When we don't seek after for ourselves, we let man seek after for us. We let man validate what we should be doing, when we should be doing it, how we should be doing it, where we should be doing it. No, that has nothing to do with man. How about being led by the Spirit of the Most High? The Spirit of the Most High will direct you when, where, and how, and who to speak the gospel message to, right? So we forget a lot of times and I'm not going to say forget, but we're not aware a lot of times what is required for us. Required for us who? When I say us, who am I talking about? For those differently wired. Who are those that are differently wired? They're the ones who are the least likely, right? They're not preaching from a pulpit inside of a building, right? They're not breaking down the word the way that you're taught to break down the word in seminary school. They're being exclusively, specifically, and totally moved and led by the Spirit of the Creator, what to speak, when to speak it, how to speak it, and whom to speak it to. All right. We're differently wired. We're going to stand apart from those who have been trained in a formal fashion, who's had a formal seminary training, who has been trained by a pastor, who was trained by a pastor, who was trained by a pastor. OK, from tradition, from a denominational standpoint. Right. That's not what's required for us. You'll read nowhere in any Bible, right? You know, and I'm just sticking strictly to the KJV. You won't find anywhere in the KJV Bible that you have to have a certain certification, a certain diploma, or a certain degree to stand forth and to preach the gospel. All right? Peter, James, and John, they were unlearned men. What seminary school did they go to? Did they listen to man tell them, no, y'all need to shut up, y'all need to wait? Peter, Kepha, Cephas, you need to wait. Yohanan, you need to wait. You need to wait till you get that certificate. You got to stand under some. You got to be seated under somebody, another man, not the Messiah, but you got to be seated under just a human man for at least a good decade, a good 10 years before you're able to go forth and speak the truth. No, that's old school. That's wrong school, right? That's what we've been traditionally, denominantly, and formally taught. But that's not the truth. That's not the truth. We have to be moved by the Spirit, and we have to be those stewards that are doing exactly what is required of us. So those stewards, gospel preachers, right? Gospel preachers don't need to be inside of a church building standing behind a pulpit to preach the gospel. They can preach the gospel on the subway. A 10-year-old that's moved by the Spirit can preach the gospel on the subway. A 7-year-old that's moved by the Spirit can preach the gospel on a Greyhound bus. All right. A 99-year-old man can preach the gospel while he's on an airplane, a 747. All right. Anybody can preach the gospel that's led, who's been chosen to preach the gospel. All right. We just have to keep in mind what is required of us. So we have to seek after. We have to seek after for a means. All right. So as I'm up on this right now, speaking, somebody would tell me, you're not supposed to be speaking and preaching the gospel and making a video when you're on the overhead tram. Well, what rule book, whose rule book are you coming from? What rule book are you coming from? Who says that I can't? What law am I breaking? How am I violating any ordinance or any commandment because I'm speaking the truth while I'm on an overhead tram? All right. This is a very good example. Now, I don't care there's people looking at me crazy, thinking that I'm talking to myself or thinking that I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Daggone it, I'm going to do what I was chosen to do. Daggone it, I'm going to do what I was moved to do. Daggone it, I'm going to do what I need to do. And that's between me and my Heavenly Father. It's none of your daggone business. So with that being said, y'all continue to have a blessed day. This is Mark. I'm out.